The cabin burned like hell itself, orange flames devouring 12 years of buried truth, while Tom Mitchell pressed his back against frozen logs, surrounded by 3 men with guns. His German shepherd, Buddy, lay bleeding in the snow beside him, having taken a bullet meant for his chest. Tom's hands trembled, not from the January cold cutting through the Adirondack night, but from the weight of his daughter's photograph, now stained with his own blood from a shoulder wound. How does a 58-year-old former detective buying a $500 cabin to escape shame and poverty end up here? How does a simple land auction in upstate New York become a death trap orchestrated by men who've killed to protect their secrets for over a decade? Tom looked at Buddy's amber eyes, still alert despite the wound, still loyal, and remembered the question that started everything. What did his dog discover beneath that stone fireplace that powerful people would murder to hide? The answer involved a missing journalist, a corruption network reaching from Canada to Chicago, and one last chance at redemption he never expected to find. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 weeks earlier, Tom Mitchell had stood in the Flathead County Courthouse clutching the last thing that hadn't abandoned him, a 7-year-old German shepherd named Buddy. At 58, Tom looked older than his years. Silver threaded through what remained of his brown hair, and lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much betrayal. His flannel shirt hung loose on a frame that had shed 20 pounds since losing everything that mattered. 30 years he'd given to the Chicago Police Department. 30 years of believing the badge meant something. Then in 2020, he'd watched his partner, Detective Ray Morrison, the man who'd stood beside him through 15 years of cases, take an envelope stuffed with cash from a drug dealer in a South Side parking garage. Tom had reported it, done exactly what the manual said, what his oath demanded. The department hadn't thanked him. They'd destroyed him. Internal affairs twisted the narrative. Suddenly Tom was the extortionist, Ray the victim. Fellow officers who'd shared coffee and war stories turned their backs in hallways. His pension got slashed. The union lawyer advised him to resign before they manufactured enough evidence to prosecute. His wife Jennifer couldn't handle the shame. The whispers at church, the neighbors who stopped waving, the way checkout clerks at the grocery store recognized his face from the news. She filed for divorce 6 months after his forced retirement, her lawyer efficient and merciless. Worse than losing Jennifer was losing Emily. His daughter, 32 years old and everything good he'd ever done in this world, had looked at him with disappointment that cut deeper than any knife. "I'm ashamed of you, Dad," she'd said over the phone, refusing to meet face to face. "Mom can't even show her face at church." The line went dead. She hadn't answered his calls since. Now Tom survived on $8,000 in savings and a gutted pension that barely covered rent. He'd scrolled through property listings for weeks, searching for something, anything he could afford. The Adirondack cabin had appeared like a lifeline. 160 acres, $500 minimum bid. Buddy lay at his feet during the auction, the dog's black and tan coat showing white around the muzzle. The German shepherd had been his K-9 partner, retired when Tom was forced out. Everyone else had abandoned him. Buddy never even considered it. The courthouse auction room smelled of old paper and wet wool coats, shaken free of January snow. Tom sat alone on a wooden bench near the back, Buddy's warm weight pressed against his leg. Around them, farmers in worn Carhartt jackets and local businessmen in insulated vests whispered among themselves, casting glances toward the stranger and his dog. The auctioneer, a portly man whose reading glasses kept sliding down his nose, droned through a list of foreclosed properties with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. A pickup truck went for $1,200. Woodworking equipment fetched $850. Each item sparked brief flurries of raised hands and competitive nods. Then the auctioneer cleared his throat, adjusting his papers. Next up we have Parcel 7B, known locally as the Old Garrison Place, 160 acres, single cabin, condition listed as poor, one well of unknown status. Property comes to the county by way of tax delinquency. 15 years of unpaid taxes, folks. The room went silent. Not the anticipatory silence of potential bidders calculating their offers, but something heavier, uncomfortable. Tom watched as neighbors who'd been chatting moments before suddenly found their boots fascinating. A woman in the third row actually crossed herself. "We'll open the bidding at $500, the auctioneer announced, his voice notably lacking enthusiasm. Tom raised his hand. 500. The auctioneer's eyes found him. "I have 500 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 6? Nothing. The silence stretched so long Tom could hear the radiator hissing in the corner. He looked around the room. No one met his gaze. An elderly man in an Elks Club jacket shook his head slowly, a gesture that seemed more warning than judgment. "Going once," the auctioneer called. "Going twice." His gavel cracked against the podium. "Sold to the gentleman in the back for $500. As Tom walked to the front to sign papers and hand over cash, whispers erupted behind him. He caught fragments. "Doesn't know what he bought. That cursed place. Garrison woman disappeared. Wouldn't go near it for 10 times that." The county clerk who processed his payment was young, maybe 25, with nervous hands that made the papers rattle. She pushed the deed toward him like it might bite, refusing to meet his eyes. Tom folded the document and slipped it into his coat pocket, aware of every stare following him out the door. He needed supplies before heading to the property. The town's general store sat on Main Street, its painted sign weathered by decades of mountain winters. Inside, it smelled of sawdust, leather, and fresh ground coffee. An elderly man stood behind the counter, his face a friendly landscape of wrinkles beneath a John Deere cap. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice warm despite the scrutiny in his eyes. "You're the fellow who just bought the Garrison place, aren't you?" "That obvious?" Tom selected a padlock from the hardware section, added lamp oil and coffee to his basket. News travels fast in a town this size. The shopkeeper, his apron read Walt, began ringing up items. "I hope you don't mind an old man's meddling, but you should know what you've walked into." Tom paused, a bag of coffee beans in his hand. "I'm listening." Walt leaned against the counter, his voice dropping. "That land belonged to Linda Garrison, journalist from back east. Moved here about 16 years ago. Smart woman, always asking questions, poking around into things." He glanced toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Then one day she just vanished. October 2013. Truck was still at the cabin, but she was gone. Never found a trace." "What was she investigating?" Tom asked. The opioid crisis hitting these communities, prescriptions flooding in, people getting hooked, then turning to cheaper stuff when the pills ran out. Walt wiped the counter, though it was already spotless. "She was asking about doctors, pharmacies, distribution. Made some folks uncomfortable. Let me guess. Sheriff Blake was one of those folks?" Walt's expression confirmed it. "Blake tried getting his hands on that property multiple times through legal tricks, but county laws are strict. Tax foreclosure has to go to public auction, no exceptions. So it just sat there for 12 years, tangled up in bureaucracy." He bagged Tom's purchases carefully. "Folks started saying it was haunted, that Linda's ghost walks those woods. That's why nobody bid against you. They see a whole lot of trouble, not a bargain." Tom paid cash, picked up his supplies. At the door, he turned back. "I appreciate the warning, Walt. I truly do." The old man nodded slowly. "Son, some stones are better left unturned." Outside, Buddy waited patiently by the truck, but when Tom mentioned Sheriff Blake's name while loading supplies, the dog's ears flattened and a low growl rumbled from his chest. It was the first warning sign Tom should have heeded. The drive to the cabin was a journey backward through civilization. Paved road gave way to gravel. then to dirt track that was little more than 2 ruts carved through snow. Tom's 1998 pickup truck groaned as he navigated around obstacles that seemed deliberately placed. A massive pine lay across the trail at a perfect angle, forcing him into a sharp turn that nearly sent the truck into a drainage ditch. Further along, thorn bushes crowded one side, their branches scraping paint from the passenger door. "These don't look natural," Tom muttered, studying a fallen aspen that blocked the most direct path. The tree was old and weathered, but its position seemed too strategic, too convenient as a barrier. Someone had spent years making this property difficult to reach. When the cabin finally appeared in a small clearing, it looked like something from a faded photograph. Log walls chinked with crumbling mortar, a stone chimney rising from a steep roof, a sagging porch that groaned under Tom's weight. Windows opaque with years of grime stared like blind eyes. Tall pines surrounded the structure, their branches heavy with snow, creating a natural fortress of isolation. The front door wasn't locked. It swung inward with a protest of rusted hinges, revealing a single large room frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the weak January sunlight filtering through dirty windows. The air smelled of cold ashes, mice droppings, and the deep, earthy scent of decay. But it was the small details that made Tom's skin prickle. A ceramic coffee mug sat on a simple wooden table, a faded ring of dried liquid visible at the bottom. Next to it, a book lay face down, pages curled as if the reader had just stepped away for a moment. On a peg near the door, a heavy wool coat still hung, one pocket bulging slightly. Against the far wall, a cast-iron bed frame stood bare to its springs. A calendar on the wall stopped at October 2013. Tom ran his finger along the table's surface, leaving a trail through the dust. "She didn't run," he said quietly to Buddy. "People don't leave their coat in an Adirondack autumn. Don't leave coffee half drunk and books unfinished." While Tom examined the cabin's eerie stillness, Buddy conducted his own investigation. The German shepherd moved methodically, nose to the ground, cataloging scents with the trained precision of his K9 years. He sniffed the corners, the bed frame, the door jambs, but when he reached the massive stone fireplace that dominated the left wall, his entire demeanor changed. Buddy froze. His body went rigid, ears flattening against his skull. A low whine, not of fear but of deep unease, vibrated from his chest. The fur along his spine bristled. "What is it, boy?" Tom approached, kneeling beside his dog. Buddy ignored him. He took stiff steps toward the hearth, his nose working frantically at the gaps between large flat stones that formed its base. This wasn't random anxiety. Tom had seen this exact behavior before, in a Southside Chicago warehouse when Buddy had located 50 kilos of heroin hidden beneath a false floor. The dog's training, even after years of retirement, was surfacing. Tom placed a calming hand on Buddy's back. The muscles beneath the black and tan fur were coiled tight as springs. "Easy. Show me what you found." Buddy pawed at one specific stone, a large rectangular slab of slate positioned dead center at the hearth's base. He scratched insistently, whined again, looked back at Tom with amber eyes that held urgency. Tom examined the stone carefully. At first glance, it seemed identical to the rounded river stones that comprised the rest of the fireplace. But as he ran his fingers along the edges, he noticed something. The mortar in the groove around this particular stone was different, darker, with a slightly rubbery texture. In some places, it had been cleverly disguised with a layer of dirt and soot. He took out his utility knife and scraped at the edge. The blade sank in slightly. This wasn't the same crumbling, sandy mixture as the rest of the fireplace. This was pitch, hardened over years but distinct. This stone was meant to be removed. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. He returned to his truck and retrieved the crowbar from his toolbox. Back inside, he wedged the flat end into the seam he'd scraped clean and put his weight into it. For a long moment, nothing happened. He repositioned, getting better leverage, his muscles straining against the unyielding stone. Then, with a low groan that seemed to come from the earth itself, the seal began to break. He worked the crowbar around the edges, chipping away at the hardened pitch. Finally, with a screech that set his teeth on edge, one side of the stone lifted several inches. Tom dropped the crowbar and gripped the edge with both hands, pulling with all his strength. The slab was immensely heavy, but it moved, sliding out of its place and onto the wooden floor with a thud that shook the cabin. Buddy fell silent. His pacing ceased. He stood beside Tom, peering down into the dark rectangular hole that had been revealed. Tom held his breath and looked down. Below was not earth, but a small man-made cavity about 4 feet deep, lined with stone, a cleverly constructed hiding place. And nestled at the bottom, resting on dry ground, were two objects that would change everything. One was a heavy, dark green metal box, the kind the military used for ammunition or sensitive documents. The other was a neat stack of leather-bound notebooks, tied together with faded twine that had once been blue. Tom looked from the hidden cache to his dog. Buddy was calm now, his tail giving a slow, satisfied wag. The source of his frantic warning had finally been answered. The German shepherd had done what he was trained to do. He'd found what was hidden. Outside, the January wind picked up, howling through the pines. Inside the cabin, Tom Mitchell knelt before a secret that had been buried for 12 years, knowing with absolute certainty that his $500 bargain had just become the most dangerous purchase of his life. Tom's hands trembled as he lifted the metal box from its stone tomb. It was heavier than expected, the kind of weight that spoke of significance rather than mere mass. He placed it carefully on the wooden table, dust swirling in the dim light. Buddy remained at attention beside the hearth, as if standing guard over secrets finally exposed. The box's latch was secured with a small padlock, rusted but intact. Tom used the crowbar again, this time with surgical precision. The lock snapped with a sharp crack. Inside, protected by the waterproof seal, lay the methodical work of someone who knew exactly what she was documenting. Laboratory reports from an independent facility in Bozeman filled the top layer. Tom scanned the columns of numbers, his police training kicking in despite years away from the job. Arsenic levels, lead concentrations, industrial solvents. But it was the prescription opioid content that made his blood run cold. Oxycodone, hydrocodone, fentanyl, all in water samples dated between 2011 and 2013. Beneath the reports were dozens of small glass vials, each filled with dark liquid and sealed with wax. Tiny, handwritten labels bore dates and GPS coordinates. Canvas bags contained soil samples, equally well documented. At the very bottom lay a large topographical map of the county, covered in red circles and notations. The pattern was unmistakable. Remote creeks, mountain springs, marshlands, the sources feeding the entire valley's water supply. Linda Garrison hadn't stumbled onto a single crime. She'd uncovered systematic poisoning. Tom carefully set the box aside and reached for the journals. The leather was supple despite the years, well maintained. He untied the twine with reverence and opened the first volume. The handwriting was neat, precise, the work of a trained journalist. January 2010. I've noticed something troubling. 3 overdose deaths in a county of barely 15,000 people. The prescribing doctor is the same in all cases, Dr. Richard Hewitt. I'm starting to document. Tom settled into the wooden chair and read, the January afternoon fading around him, Linda's investigation unfolded in careful detail across the journals. She'd documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who understood she might not survive to testify. By 2011, she'd identified a network: doctors writing excessive prescriptions, pharmacies filling them without question. But the supply chain fascinated her most. How did rural Adirondack communities suddenly have access to such quantities of controlled substances? March 2011. Met with Marcus Webb today. He owns a logistics company, warehouses, trucking, storage facilities. Very friendly, very interested in why I'm asking questions about shipping routes. Too interested. His business locations align perfectly with the coordinates I've mapped. June 2011. Sheriff Raymond Blake came to my cabin, called it a courtesy visit to discuss a property line dispute. There is no dispute. This was a warning dressed in politeness. The harassment escalated through 2012, county inspectors citing violations that didn't exist, property tax assessments mysteriously tripling, anonymous letters suggesting she leave before something unfortunate happens. The same playbook Tom had experienced in Chicago: bureaucratic strangulation designed to break someone without overt violence. But Linda had discovered something bigger in her final months. The opioid crisis wasn't organic. It was engineered. September 2013. I've connected the pieces. Fentanyl is being smuggled from Canada through the Adirondacks to New York City. Webb uses his legitimate shipping business as cover. But the genius is the addiction pipeline they created first. Get people hooked on prescriptions, then, when that becomes too expensive or scrutinized, they're desperate for the cheaper street drugs. It's a business model. They created their own customer base. Tom's jaw clenched as he read financial estimates Linda had compiled. Over $2 million annually flowing through this network. Names filled the margins, not just Webb and Blake, but doctors, pharmacists, county officials, a complete ecosystem of corruption. The final entries made his chest tight. October 15, 2013. I'm ready to go public. I've sent copies of everything to 3 separate journalists in Albany and New York City. I've scheduled a meeting with the FBI field office in Albany for October 22nd. Blake knows something is happening. He's been parked on the road watching my cabin for 2 days. I'm not sleeping here anymore. Staying with Maggie. October 20th, 2013. Maggie is terrified. She wants me to run, leave everything. But if I run, this continues. More people die. Daniel, her son, is already showing signs of addiction. He's 23 years old and his doctor has him on 90 milligrams of oxycodone daily for a back injury that healed months ago. This is why I have to finish this. October 21st, 2013. Final entry before I mail the evidence tomorrow. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or wish I was. Please finish what I started. The cache beneath the hearth contains everything you need. Trust no one in local law enforcement. LG. Tom closed the journal, his hands shaking. Linda Garrison had known she was walking into death and done it anyway. He looked around the cabin with new understanding. This wasn't abandoned. It was a monument. A trap set 12 years ago, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to spring it. A sound outside made Buddy's head snap up. Tom moved to the grimy window and rubbed a small circle clean. Nothing but snow-laden pines and failing daylight. But Buddy remained tense, ears forward. Tom's law enforcement instincts screamed at him. Walt's warning echoed, "Some stones are better left unturned." The smart move was to pack everything up, drive to the nearest FBI field office, hand it all over, and disappear back into anonymity. But Tom thought of Emily, of the last words she'd spoken to him. "I'm ashamed of you, Dad. Not for being corrupt, but for what she believed was corruption. If he ran now, he'd be the coward she thought he was. If he ran, Linda Garrison's sacrifice meant nothing. He was still wrestling with the decision when morning brought an unexpected visitor. Tom had spent the night in his truck, unwilling to sleep in a cabin that felt increasingly like a target. Dawn broke, gray and cold, his breath fogging the windows. He was heating instant coffee on a camp stove when he saw her, an elderly woman approaching on snowshoes, moving with surprising confidence through the deep powder. She was perhaps 75, face weathered by mountain winters but eyes sharp and assessing. She wore a faded parka and carried a cloth-wrapped bundle. Buddy watched her approach but didn't bark, which itself was unusual. "You're the man who bought Linda's place," she called out, stopping a respectful distance from the truck. Not a question, a statement. Tom climbed out slowly, hands visible. "Tom Mitchell. Maggie O'Connor. I live about 2 miles that way." She pointed northeast. "Thought I'd bring welcome bread. Town custom." She extended the bundle. Tom accepted it, the loaf still warm beneath the cloth. "That's kind of you, Mrs. O'Connor." "Maggie's fine." Her eyes moved past him to the cabin, lingering on the chimney. "How'd you sleep?" "In the truck, actually." She nodded as if this confirmed something. "How smart? That cabin has complications." She paused, seeming to choose words carefully. "Linda Garrison was my friend. Good woman. Asked too many questions, but good." "You knew her well." "Well enough." Maggie's gaze finally met his. "Well enough to know she didn't just disappear." She glanced at Buddy, who had moved closer, sniffing her boots with interest. "That's a police dog, isn't he? Retired K-9? Was, like me, retired cop. Chicago? News travels fast. In towns this size, news is entertainment." Maggie shifted her weight, snowshoes crunching. "I'll give you the same warning I gave Linda, though she didn't listen. There are people in this county who don't want the past examined. Powerful people. They've had 12 years to think that past was buried." Her eyes flicked to the cabin again. "You go digging around in there, you'll find things. Question is what you'll do about them." "What would you do?" Tom asked. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. "I had a son, Daniel. He died in 2015. Overdose. The doctor who got him hooked on pills never faced consequences, never even lost his license." Her voice remained steady, but her hands tightened on the straps of her snowshoes. "So I'll tell you what I tell myself every morning. Sometimes survival means swallowing truth until someone brave enough comes along to spit it back out." She turned to leave, then paused. "That dog of yours is smart. Listen to him. And Mr. Mitchell, Linda kept the important things close. She knew how to hide what mattered." With that cryptic advice, Maggie O'Connor snowshoed back into the pine forest, leaving Tom with more questions than answers. He spent the next 2 days reading Linda's journals completely, filling notebooks of his own with connections and cross-references. The harassment campaign Linda documented was nearly identical to what Tom had experienced in Chicago. The manufactured violations, the financial pressure, the isolation tactics. And it was a template, a playbook used across different jurisdictions, but one detail kept nagging at him. Linda's final entry mentioned sending evidence to journalists and scheduling an FBI meeting. Yet here was all her evidence, still hidden, which meant either she'd never made it to that meeting, or the copies she'd sent had been intercepted. On the third afternoon, Buddy's behavior changed again. Tom was outside splitting firewood when the German shepherd froze mid-step, his nose lifted testing the wind, his ears swiveled tracking something Tom's duller human senses couldn't detect. Tom set down the axe and moved beside Buddy, following the dog's gaze into the tree line northeast of the cabin. At first he saw nothing but the dense wall of pines and the white monotony of snow. Then a glint, brief, metallic, catching the weak winter sun. Tom grabbed his binoculars from the truck and scanned the area carefully. There, Deep in the shadows between two massive spruce trees, partially concealed by underbrush, a shape too regular to be natural, too still to be animal. Tom watched for 5 patient minutes before he caught it again. The lens of a camera or binoculars, reflecting light for just a moment before vanishing back into darkness. Someone was watching the cabin, watching him. Tom lowered his binoculars and returned to splitting wood, his movements deliberately casual. But his mind raced. The surveillance wasn't subtle. It was meant to be noticed, meant to intimidate. They wanted him to know he was being observed, wanted him to feel the pressure, make a mistake. As he worked, Tom noticed Buddy's attention shifting. The dog's head turned slowly, tracking something else. Another position. Tom realized with cold certainty that there wasn't one watcher. There were multiple positions, a coordinated surveillance operation. That night, Tom made his decision. He carefully repacked Linda's evidence, taking particular care with the journals. He photographed key pages with an old digital camera, storing the SD card separately. He placed the metal box and journals back in the hearth's hidden chamber and sealed the stone as perfectly as possible, spreading dirt and ash to disguise any disturbance. If they were watching, they'd seen him arrive but couldn't know what he'd found. As long as the evidence remained hidden and he appeared to be just another failure settling into cheap property, he had an advantage. The moment he ran or contacted authorities, that advantage disappeared. Tom needed a plan. He needed allies. And most critically, he needed to get information out without them knowing until it was too late to stop. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped to single digits, Tom sat in his truck with Buddy curled beside him, studying the map he'd photographed. His eyes kept returning to one detail Linda had circled multiple times: a warehouse complex owned by Webb Logistics sitting less than 20 miles from the Canadian border. Tomorrow, he would drive to the nearest town with secure internet access. He would reach out to the one person from his old life who might still trust him. But tonight, he would sleep in shifts, rifle across his lap, trusting Buddy's senses to wake him if the watchers in the woods became something worse. The bargain cabin was already proving expensive in ways the county clerk could never have imagined. The assault came at midnight on Tom's 4th night at the cabin. Buddy's low growl woke Tom from restless sleep in the truck's cab. The German Shepherd was rigid, staring toward the cabin's front door, his ears flat against his skull. Tom's hand instinctively went to the rifle propped against the passenger seat. Through the frost-covered windshield, he saw nothing but darkness and the cabin's black silhouette against snow that glowed faintly under a sliver of moon. Then, movement. A shadow detaching from the tree line, moving with practiced stealth toward the porch. Tom eased the truck door open, cold air hitting him like a physical blow. The temperature had dropped to near zero. His breath came out in white clouds as he circled wide, using the truck for cover, Buddy a silent presence at his heel. The figure on the porch wore dark tactical clothing and a ski mask. Tom watched him work on the new padlock with professional efficiency. This wasn't some opportunistic thief. The lock clicked open within seconds. The intruder pushed the door inward, pausing on the threshold. Tom had prepared for this. He'd deliberately left the cabin empty of anything valuable except the hidden cache beneath the hearth. If they were looking for Linda's evidence, they'd have to reveal themselves by going straight for it. The intruder stepped inside. Tom waited, counting to 10, then moved to the window. Through the grimy glass, he could see the beam of a flashlight playing across the interior. The beam moved methodically, table, walls, bed frame, then stopped on the fireplace. The figure approached the hearth, crouched, examining the stones. Tom had seen enough. He stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning under his weight. Inside, the flashlight beam snapped toward the sound. Tom raised his rifle. not aiming at the person, but at the doorframe beside them. The shot was deafening in the mountain silence. Wood splintered where the bullet struck, showering the intruder with fragments. The figure stumbled backward with a startled curse. A young voice, male, terrified. Buddy needed no command. He launched himself through the open door, 80 pounds of trained muscle and protective fury. He didn't bite. Tom's commands from their K-9 days still held, but he hit the intruder's legs with the force of a linebacker, a takedown move designed to destabilize without causing permanent damage. The man went down hard, his flashlight skittering across the floor. Buddy stood over him, teeth bared inches from his face, a growl rumbling from deep in his chest that promised violence if the stranger moved. "Don't," Tom said quietly, entering with rifle raised. "He's trained to go for the throat, and he's very, very good at his job." The intruder lay perfectly still, breathing hard, the ski mask having slipped to reveal terrified eyes. He couldn't have been more than 25. Tom kept the rifle trained on him while using his free hand to pat him down, a Glock 19 in a hip holster, a knife strapped to his ankle, zip ties in his pocket, a two-way radio. Tom pocketed the radio and weapons, then used the zip ties to secure the man's hands behind his back. "Who sent you?" Silence. "You broke into my property with weapons and restraints. That's felony burglary and attempted kidnapping. You want to add refusing to cooperate to your charges?" "I want a lawyer," the young man managed, his voice shaking. Tom almost smiled. Even criminal trespassers knew their rights. "Buddy, watch him." The German shepherd settled into a sitting position 2 feet from the intruder's head, his attention unwavering. Tom moved to the window and scanned the darkness outside. The radio in his pocket crackled. "Danny, you copy? Status?" Tom didn't respond. After 30 seconds, the voice came again, urgent. "Danny, respond now or we're pulling out." The sound of an engine starting in the distance confirmed it. They'd sent someone young and inexperienced as a test, keeping their distance to maintain deniability. When he failed to report, they abandoned him. Professional and cold. Tom looked down at his captive. "Danny, is it? They just left you. You understand that? You're expendable to them." The young man's face crumpled. "I didn't sign up for this. Webb said it was just checking if the cabin was empty. Said the new owner probably wouldn't even stay the winter." "Marcus Webb sent you directly?" Danny's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. I can't. You just did." Tom crouched down, his tone almost gentle. "Listen to me carefully. You broke into a former cop's property. I have every legal right to hold you for the county sheriff, but we both know Sheriff Blake works for Webb, don't we? So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to cut those zip ties. You're going to walk out of here, and you're going to tell Webb that this cabin is occupied by someone who knows how to defend it. He'll kill me for failing. Then you'd better make it convincing that I was too dangerous to handle alone." Tom pulled out his knife and cut the restraints. "Go. And Danny, don't come back. Next time, Buddy won't just hold you down." The young man scrambled up and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Tom listened until the sound of crashing footsteps through snow faded completely. "Well," he said to Buddy, scratching behind the dog's ears, "that was informative. But it was also a declaration of war. They knew he was here. They knew he wasn't leaving. And now they knew he'd fight back." The next visit would be more professional, more dangerous, more final. Tom couldn't wait for them to choose the moment. He needed to act first. The next morning, Tom drove his circuitous route to Lake Placid, taking 4 hours to cover 60 miles, constantly checking his mirrors for surveillance. He parked 3 blocks from the public library and walked the rest, Buddy at his side. The dog's limp was more pronounced today, the tumor on his hind leg causing visible pain despite his stoic silence. "I know, boy," Tom murmured. "Just a little longer. I promise." Inside the library's warmth, Tom found a computer terminal in a quiet corner. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. What he was about to do would either save his life or end it. There was no middle ground. He logged into an encrypted email service he'd maintained for years, one that required a password and a physical security key he'd kept even after losing his badge. The account existed in a gray area, technically his from Chicago PD days, but never officially deactivated. Using it was probably a crime, but Tom was long past worrying about small crimes. He typed one name in the recipient field: Sarah Chen. Sarah had been an FBI liaison during a joint task force in Chicago back in 2018. They'd worked a human trafficking case together, and she'd been one of the few federal agents who didn't treat local cops like ignorant children. When Tom's world imploded in 2020, Sarah had called him twice. Once to say she believed him, once to offer help he'd been too proud to accept. Now he had no choice. The email was brief. "Sarah, it's Tom Mitchell. I know this comes from nowhere after 5 years. I'm in trouble, the kind that connects to something bigger. I've found evidence of a drug distribution network in upstate New York tied to the opioid crisis. It involves local law enforcement, which is why I'm contacting you directly. I'm attaching preliminary information. The full evidence is secured, but I'm exposed. If I don't contact you by 0600 hours tomorrow morning, Eastern Time, it means I'm either dead or compromised. At that point, please forward everything to your field office and provide these GPS coordinates to a tactical team. 44.2087 DG N 7405 DGs WW. Come prepared for resistance. This network has already killed at least once to protect itself. The password for the encrypted files is Checkpoint Bravo. You'll remember why. Tom." He scanned the photographs he'd taken of Linda's journals, her map, the lab reports. He compressed and encrypted them, then attached them to the email. His finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once he sent this, he was committed. Webb and Blake would eventually find out. They had to assume law enforcement infiltration at some level. They would come for him with everything they had, trying to eliminate him before 6 a.m. deadline. Tom thought of Emily, of her voice saying, "I'm ashamed of you, Dad." If he died in these mountains, she'd never know he'd tried to do the right thing. She'd live the rest of her life believing her father was corrupt, but if he ran now, he'd prove her right. He clicked send. The library's clock read 11:47 a.m. He had 18 hours and 13 minutes to survive. Tom cleared the browser history meticulously, used the library's scanner to make one more backup copy of the most critical documents, and bought a prepaid phone from a convenience store across the street. In an alley between buildings, hidden from view, he made one call. The phone rang 4 times before Sarah's professional voice answered, "Chen." "Sarah, it's Tom Mitchell." A pause. "Tom? Where are you calling from?" "Adirondacks, upstate New York. Did you get my email?" "I'm looking at it now." "Jesus, Tom, how reliable is this source?" "Completely. The journalist who compiled it disappeared 12 years ago. I found her evidence cache hidden in a cabin I just bought. Sarah, this is real. The distribution network, the corruption, all of it documented." "Oh, but I'm exposed. They already sent someone to my location last night." "Then get out. Drive to the nearest FBI field office right now." "I can't. If I move the evidence, they'll know. If I leave, they'll burn everything and disappear. This network has had 12 years to perfect their operation. I'm the first crack in their wall, but only if I hold position." "Tom, I can't authorize. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm asking for trust. If you don't hear from me by 6 a.m. tomorrow, it means they got to me. At that point, the evidence location and everything you need is in that email. But Sarah, don't wait too long after 6. They'll destroy everything the moment I'm gone. Another pause. Tom could hear keyboard typing in the background. The preliminary information you sent is substantial. If the full cache is as complete as you say, it is. It's prosecutable. It's conviction-level evidence. All right, Sarah said, her voice shifting into operational mode. Here's what's going to happen. I'm flagging this as priority and informing my SAC. We'll have a tactical team on standby. If you miss that 6 a.m. check-in, we're coming in heavy. FBI, state police, the works. Thank you. Tom, don't be a hero. If you get a chance to run, run. Evidence can be recreated. You can't. Tom looked down at Buddy, who was watching him with those knowing amber eyes. I've got a good partner watching my back. We'll be fine. He ended the call, removed the battery from the burner phone, and dropped the pieces in separate trash cans. The clock above the convenience store read 1:23 p.m. 16 hours and 37 minutes. The drive back to the cabin took 3 careful hours. Tom stopped twice to ensure he wasn't followed, his paranoia now a survival tool rather than a symptom. When the cabin finally came into view through the pines, it looked exactly as he'd left it. Quiet, isolated, waiting. But as Tom stepped out of the truck, Buddy's hackles rose. The dog's nose lifted, testing the wind, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Someone had been here. Recently. Tom approached the cabin slowly, rifle ready. The door was still locked, his lock undisturbed. But in the snow around the porch, he found fresh boot prints, multiple sets from multiple directions. They'd surrounded the cabin, examined it, and left. Inside, everything appeared untouched. But Tom noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the wooden table, precisely centered, sat a single item that hadn't been there before. A photograph. It was a picture of Emily, his daughter, caught by a telephoto lens, walking out of her apartment building in Chicago. The image was recent. She wore a winter coat Tom didn't recognize. On the back, written in neat handwriting, was a simple message. Choices have consequences. Tom's hands shook as he held the photograph. They'd found Emily. They were telling him they could reach her anytime they wanted. The message was clear. Back off, or your daughter pays the price. For a long moment, Tom stood frozen, the photo trembling in his grip. Every instinct screamed at him to call Emily, warn her, beg her to hide. But he had no way to contact her. She'd blocked his number years ago, and even if he could reach her, what would he say? I'm sorry, the corruption I uncovered has put you in danger. Buddy pressed against his leg, offering silent comfort. Tom looked down at his loyal companion, then back at the photograph of his daughter. He had less than 16 hours to survive, 16 hours until Sarah Chen triggered the federal response that would bring down Webb's entire network. 16 hours during which Webb and Blake would throw everything they had at eliminating the threat. Tom carefully placed Emily's photo in his inside jacket pocket, close to his heart. Then he began to fortify the cabin in earnest, moving with the methodical precision of someone who'd defended positions in harder places than these mountains. They want to play hardball, he said to Buddy. Let's show them what a Chicago cop and a K-9 veteran can do. Outside, the winter sun was already sinking toward the mountains. Darkness would come early, and with it, Tom knew, would come the final reckoning. The blizzard arrived at dusk, just as the Weather Service had predicted. Within an hour, visibility dropped to near zero. Wind screamed through the pines at 60 miles per hour, driving snow horizontally across the clearing. The temperature plummeted to 10 below zero. Tom had prepared as best he could. He'd stacked furniture against the windows, creating barricades that would slow anyone trying to breach them. The heavy wooden table now blocked the front door, chairs wedged beneath its handle. He'd positioned his rifle and extra ammunition at strategic points around the single room. The fire in the hearth burned low but steady, providing just enough light to see by without making him a silhouette target. Buddy lay near the fireplace, but his usual calm had vanished. The German shepherd's head moved constantly, tracking sounds Tom's duller hearing couldn't distinguish from the wind. Every few minutes, Buddy would rise, pace to a different position, then settle again with his attention fixed on some point in the darkness outside. Tom checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. 6 hours and 13 minutes until Sarah Chen's deadline. 6 hours to survive. He'd written a final letter to Emily, sealed it in a waterproof bag along with copies of Linda's most damning evidence, and hidden it in the stone cache beneath the hearth. If he died tonight, at least his daughter would know the truth eventually. The letter began. Emily, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I never stopped fighting for what was right, even when it cost me everything, including you. At 12:30 a.m., Buddy's low growl cut through the storm's roar. The dog stood rigid, staring at the cabin's rear window, the one Tom had reinforced least, thinking it the most difficult approach through dense undergrowth. Tom moved to that position, rifle ready, and peered through a gap in his barricade. At first, he saw only swirling white chaos. Then, for just a moment when the wind shifted, he spotted it. A faint beam of light in the tree line, quickly extinguished. Then another from a different angle, and another. They were surrounding the cabin, multiple attackers moving into position under cover of the blizzard. Professional, coordinated, final. Tom's mouth went dry. He'd faced dangerous situations before, but always with backup, always with a radio linking him to reinforcements. Here, he had only Buddy and his own determination to live until morning. The first gunshot came without warning, a sharp crack barely audible over the storm. The bullet punched through the log wall 6 inches from Tom's head, splinters exploding inward. He dropped instinctively, pulling Buddy down with him. More shots followed, testing the cabin's defenses from multiple directions. They weren't trying to hit him yet. They were probing, finding weak points, wearing down his resolve. Tom returned fire carefully, conserving ammunition. Each shot he took revealed his position, so he moved constantly, using different windows, never staying in one place long enough to become predictable. This was it. The siege had begun, and Tom Mitchell had 6 hours to survive it. The siege continued through the darkest hours of winter night, a brutal choreography of violence and survival. Tom moved through the cabin like a ghost, never staying in one position long enough to become a target. Buddy tracked the attackers by sound and scent, his low growls directing Tom's attention to each new threat before it materialized. At 1:15 a.m., a window on the east side shattered. Tom fired twice toward the sound, rewarded by a yelp of pain and retreating footsteps. The barricade held. Whoever tried to breach it had been driven back. At 2:30 a.m., the probing attack ceased. An eerie silence fell, broken only by the howling wind. Tom knew this tactic, the lull before escalation. They were regrouping, planning something bigger. He used the quiet to check his resources. 8 rounds left in the rifle. The Glock he'd taken from Danny had a full magazine. 15 rounds. Not enough for a prolonged firefight. His shoulder ached from the splinter wound, and exhaustion pulled at his consciousness like an undertow. Buddy was limping badly now, the tumor on his hind leg visibly swollen from the stress and movement. Tom knelt beside his dog, running gentle hands over the injury. Buddy licked his face, tail giving a weak wag. "I'm sorry, boy," Tom whispered. "I got you into this mess. Should have just walked away." But even as he said it, Tom knew it was a lie. Walking away had never been an option, not from Linda Garrison's truth, not from the chance to prove to Emily that her father wasn't the corrupt coward everyone believed him to be. At 3:45 a.m., the real assault began. It came from three sides simultaneously, a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm him. The back window exploded inward as someone climbed through, moving fast despite the barricade. Tom spun, fired, missed. The figure dove behind the bed frame. The front door shuddered under repeated impacts. They were using a battering ram or something similar. The table Tom had wedged against it wouldn't hold long. West window, glass breaking, another intruder forcing entry. Buddy launched himself at the figure behind the bed frame with a ferocious snarl. Tom heard the man scream as 80 pounds of trained German shepherd made contact. But he couldn't look. The front door was failing, the table beginning to splinter. Tom fired 3 shots through the door itself, aiming low. Someone outside howled in pain. The battering stopped. Behind him, Buddy had the intruder pinned, jaws clamped on the man's forearm. But the figure at the west window was raising a pistol, aiming at Buddy's exposed side. Tom's world narrowed to that single moment. He could shoot the man threatening Buddy, but that meant turning his back on the failing front door. Or he could hold the door, but Buddy would die. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. Tom turned and fired. The shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him backward through the window he'd just breached. Tom heard him crash into snow outside, cursing, but the distraction cost him. The front door exploded inward, table and chair scattering. 2 men rushed through, tactical gear and ski masks, moving with military precision. Tom's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, drawing the Glock, but one of the intruders was already on him. They crashed into the wall, grappling. Tom felt a fist connect with his jaw. Stars burst across his vision. He drove his knee into the man's groin, heard a grunt of pain, twisted free. The second intruder had a clear shot at Tom's back. Time seemed to slow. Tom saw the man's finger tightening on the trigger. Then Buddy was there, impossibly fast despite his injury, hitting the gunman's legs from the side. The shot went wild, punching into the ceiling. The man went down hard, and Buddy's jaws found his gun arm. The sickening crunch of bone breaking cut through the chaos. The pistol clattered away. The man screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure agony. Tom used those precious seconds to regain his feet. The first intruder was recovering, reaching for a backup weapon. Tom shot him in the leg, not to kill, but to disable. The man collapsed, clutching his thigh. Suddenly it was over. 3 intruders down, one with a shattered forearm courtesy of Buddy, one with a gunshot wound to the shoulder, one with a leg wound. The rest had retreated into the storm. Tom stood in the wreckage of his barricades, breathing hard, the Glock steady in his hand. Buddy limped back to his side, muzzle bloody, but eyes alert. "Good boy," Tom managed. "Best damn partner I ever had." He used zip ties from his supplies to secure the 3 wounded men, then pulled their ski masks off. Young faces, mid-20s, terrified now that the adrenaline was fading. Not hardened criminals, just kids who'd made bad choices for what they probably thought was easy money. "Field dressing," Tom ordered, pointing to the first aid kit. "Stop the bleeding. You want to live to see morning? You keep pressure on those wounds." One of them, the one Buddy had disarmed, looked up at Tom with tears streaming down his face. "My arm. Jesus, it's broken bad." Should have thought of that before breaking into an occupied home. Tom checked his watch. 4:15 a.m. 1 hour and 45 minutes until Sarah Chen's deadline. So close. That's when he heard it. Outside in the storm, a new sound. Not footsteps or gunfire, but an engine. A vehicle approaching, grinding through deep snow. Tom moved to the shattered front door and peered out. Through the blizzard's white chaos, he saw headlights. A large SUV emerged from the tree line, moving slowly but deliberately toward the cabin. The vehicle stopped 30 yards away. The engine idled. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a voice boomed through a loudspeaker, distorted by wind but unmistakable. "Mitchell! It's over!" Marcus Webb. Tom recognized the voice from Linda's journal descriptions. Smooth, businessman confident even now. "You think you're smart? You think anybody's coming to save you?" Tom didn't respond. Engaging in dialogue was what Webb wanted, to assess his state, his resources, his resolve. "I know you contacted the FBI," Webb continued. The loudspeaker made his voice seem to come from everywhere at once. "You think Sarah Chen is going to ride to your rescue? In this storm? Roads are impassable. No helicopters can fly. You're alone, detective. Alone with a dying dog and 3 of my men you've stupidly kept as hostages." Tom's blood ran cold. Webb knew about Sarah, knew about the deadline, which meant he had someone inside law enforcement feeding him information. The net was tighter than Tom had realized. "Here's what's going to happen." Webb's voice carried a note of finality. "You're going to send my men out. Then you're going to walk out after them, hands visible, weapon on the ground. We'll make this quick and painless, or—" The voice hardened. "You can make me do this the hard way. And trust me, Mitchell, the hard way means you watch your dog bleed out slowly before I put a bullet in your head." Tom looked at Buddy. The German shepherd was panting hard, pain evident in every labored breath. The tumor had ruptured during the fight. Blood stained the floor around his hind leg. Without veterinary attention soon, Buddy would die. Webb knew it. He'd found the perfect pressure point. "You've got 60 seconds to decide," Webb announced. "After that, I'm burning this cabin to the ground with all of you inside. Your choice, detective. Easy death or hard one. But either way, you're not making it to sunrise." Tom's hands trembled. He looked at his watch, 4:47 a.m. 1 hour and 13 minutes until Sarah Chen triggered the response. 1 hour and 13 minutes that might as well have been an eternity. Outside, Webb began counting down. 60, 59, 58. Tom made his decision. He couldn't let Buddy suffer for his choices. He couldn't let these wounded young men burn for following the wrong orders. And he couldn't let Webb win. He placed the Glock on the table, raised his hands, and walked toward the door. "I'm coming out," he called. "Don't shoot." Tom stepped out into the blizzard, into the glare of headlights, into what he knew was almost certainly his death. Behind him, Buddy struggled to follow, loyalty overwhelming pain. The cabin door swung shut behind them. The countdown stopped. Webb's silhouette emerged from behind the headlights, flanked by 4 more armed men. "Smart choice," Webb said, though his smile was anything but kind. "Now, where's the evidence?" Tom's watch read 4:52 a.m. 68 minutes until Sarah Chen's deadline. 68 minutes until federal agents would storm this location. He just had to stay alive that long. But as Webb's men surrounded him, as rough hands grabbed his arms, forced him to his knees in the snow, as someone kicked Buddy away when the dog tried to protect him, Tom felt that hope slipping away. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a frozen clearing in the Adirondacks, betrayed by information leaks, outmaneuvered by a network that had perfected survival over 12 years. Tom closed his eyes and thought of Emily. At least Sarah had the evidence. At least his daughter would eventually know the truth. Webb crouched in front of him, pulling Tom's face up by the chin. "I asked you a question, detective. Where is the evidence?" "Burned," Tom lied through chattering teeth. "In the fireplace, when I heard you coming." Webb's fist crashed into Tom's face. Pain exploded across his cheekbone. Blood filled his mouth. "Try again." Tom spat blood into the snow. "Go to hell!" Another punch, this one to his ribs. Tom heard something crack, felt breath leave his lungs in an agonized rush. Webb stood, brushing snow from his expensive winter gear. "You know what? It doesn't matter. We'll tear that cabin apart stone by stone. We'll find it." He turned to his men. "Take them both. The dog, too. Leverage if Mitchell resists." Two men grabbed Tom under the arms, hauling him up. His legs wouldn't support him. The cold and beating had taken their toll. Another man approached Buddy with a catch pole, the kind used for dangerous animals. Buddy tried to stand to defend his partner one more time, but his injured leg collapsed. He fell into the snow with a whimper that tore through Tom's heart worse than any physical pain. "No," Tom gasped. "Please, let him be. He's just a dog." "He's done nothing." "Should have thought of that before you stuck your nose where it doesn't belong," Webb said coldly. "Load them up. We'll finish this at the warehouse." Tom's watch read 5:03 a.m., 57 minutes until the deadline. As they dragged him toward the SUV, as consciousness began to fade from cold and pain and despair, Tom's last coherent thought was a prayer. "Sarah, please don't be late." The sound cut through Tom's fading consciousness like a blade, not the wind, not engines, but something rhythmic and mechanical, a thump, thump, thump that grew louder with each passing second, vibrating through the frozen air. Helicopter rotors. Webb heard it too. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the storm-darkened sky. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Nothing can fly in this." Then the searchlights hit, massive beams cutting through the blizzard like dawn breaking through night. Two helicopters materialized from the storm, FBI markings visible on their sides, descending into the clearing with the controlled aggression of a tactical insertion. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker, so loud it seemed to shake snow from the pine branches. "FBI, drop your weapons! Put your hands in the air! You are surrounded!" Webb's men froze, caught between instinct and training. The helicopters touched down simultaneously, rotors still spinning, and agents in tactical gear poured out, a coordinated swarm of federal authority that transformed the isolated clearing into a secured crime scene in seconds. "Drop them now!" the voice commanded again. Webb's men looked at their boss. For a moment Tom thought Webb might order them to fight, a final desperate stand. But Webb was a businessman, not a soldier. He understood when the game was lost. "Do it," Webb said quietly. His own pistol hit the snow first, followed by the weapons of his men. Hands rose reluctantly into the air. State police vehicles were arriving now, too, grinding through cleared paths, adding their numbers to the federal presence. Within minutes, Webb and his men were on their knees, hands zip-tied behind their backs, Miranda rights being read over the howling wind. Tom lay in the snow where they'd dropped him, barely conscious, his broken ribs screaming with each shallow breath. Through dimming vision, he saw a figure running toward him, a woman in FBI tactical gear, her face familiar even under the helmet. Sarah Chen dropped to her knees beside him. "Tom, stay with me. Medic." "You came," Tom whispered, the words costing him everything. "Before the deadline." "You called at 11 last night, Tom. Your deadline was 6 a.m. today. We've been circling for 30 minutes waiting for the storm to break enough to land." Sarah's hands were checking his injuries with professional efficiency. "We were never going to be late." A paramedic arrived, began working on Tom's injuries. Another team rushed to Buddy, who lay motionless in the snow. "We need the veterinary specialist," someone shouted. "Dog's in critical condition." "Buddy," Tom tried to sit up, but gentle hands pushed him back down. "We brought a vet specifically for him," Sarah said. "I remembered you mentioned he needed surgery." "He's going to get the best care possible." Tears froze on Tom's cheeks. "The evidence beneath the hearth, we'll secure it. Tom, you did it." 23 arrests so far across 3 states. Sheriff Blake, Marcus Webb, doctors, distributors, the whole network is coming down. She gripped his hand. "You finished what Linda Garrison started." As the paramedics lifted Tom onto a stretcher, as warmth from emergency blankets began to seep into his frozen body, he heard another voice. Young, female, desperate. "Dad! Dad!" Tom's eyes flew open. Through the chaos of agents and vehicles and swirling snow, he saw her. Emily, climbing out of one of the police vehicles, running toward him with tears streaming down her face. "Emily?" The name came out as barely a whisper. She reached him as they were loading him into the medical helicopter, her hand grabbing his. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never believed them. I was investigating. I've been investigating for 5 years. I found the connections. I'm the one who gave Sarah the additional information last night when I saw your email trail. You've been working as an investigative journalist, following your case, following the network you uncovered." Emily's voice broke. "I bought the cabin through a shell company, Dad. I arranged for the county to foreclose and auction it. I knew you'd look for the cheapest place. I knew if you found Linda's evidence, you'd do the right thing. I needed to give you a reason to fight again." Tom stared at his daughter, understanding dawning through the pain and exhaustion. "You set this up. I gave you the opportunity. You did the rest." Emily squeezed his hand. "You taught me that truth matters more than comfort. I needed you to remember that too. Sometimes the greatest treasures in life come disguised as bargains we almost pass by." Tom Mitchell thought he was buying a $500 cabin to hide from shame and loneliness, but what he really found was redemption, purpose, and the daughter he thought he'd lost forever. His story reminds us that it's never too late to do the right thing, never too late to rebuild broken relationships, and never too late to discover that the bonds of loyalty, whether with family or a faithful companion, are worth more than any fortune. In our later years, when the world tells us our best days are behind us, Tom's journey shows us something different. That courage doesn't have an expiration date, that standing up for truth still matters, and that sometimes the people we think we've lost are actually fighting for us in ways we never knew. The love between Tom and Buddy, between father and daughter, proves that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the unshakable connections we forge with those who never give up on us. What relationship in your life needs healing? Have you ever discovered that someone loved you more than you realized? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.